Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The silent expanse continued, asterisk asterisk. The wind howled louder as if echoing the panic rising within Evelyn. She glanced from the unconscious Marcus to the glowing woman standing before them, her translucent skin shimmering in the storm. The blizzard continued to rage, but there was something almost surreal about the way the cold seemed to retreat from the stranger, as if she were an anomaly in this frozen wasteland. For a brief moment, Evelyn hesitated. The woman's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, only your body heat can cure me in this cold. Please take me in and I will give the best reward. Asterisk, there was an urgency in her voice, but also a sense of desperation that Evelyn couldn't ignore. And yet, the scientist in her told her to be cautious. This woman could be a danger. But Marcus needed help and fast. Who are you? Evelyn demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. How do you know about heat? The woman stepped forward, and Evelyn instinctively took a step back, still keeping her eyes on Marcus, whose body was now showing signs of shock. His lips were turning blue and his breathing was shallow. My name is Lysandra, the woman said softly, her voice lilting like a melody. I have lived for centuries or what feels like it. I am the last of my kind. The Illyrians. She faltered slightly as though the memory was painful. We were once able to control the life force of this world. We could survive where others would perish. But that was long ago. Evelyn wasn't sure if she should trust her. The Illyrians? That name sounded vaguely familiar, but there had been no records of an alien race fitting her description in the archives of Zeros. Was she lying? Or was this something beyond the scope of known history? You can help him? Evelyn asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. Lysandra nodded slowly. I can, she replied, but her voice was strained now. But not for long. Evelyn's mind raced. Could she risk letting this stranger touch Marcus? Yet the only other option was to let him die in the cold. There was no time to waste. Without another word, she dropped to her knees beside Marcus and tore open his suit to expose his shivering, pale chest. I don't know how long I can keep him alive, she muttered under her breath. Lysandra knelt down beside them, the glowing blue of her eyes piercing the storm as she placed her hand gently on Marcus's chest. The instant her skin touched his, the air seemed to warm, though faintly at first. A soft hum vibrated from Lysandra's body, and a pale blue light pulsed from her hand, spreading over Marcus's body like liquid fire. Evelyn watched in awe, her mouth slightly agape. It was as if the woman was pulling the very essence of warmth from the air, drawing it into herself and then channeling it into Marcus. Slowly his body began to respond. His color returned to his face, and his shallow breathing grew deeper, more regular. Minutes passed in a tense silence. The storm howled on, but beneath the woman's touch, Marcus seemed to be stabilizing. Evelyn didn't dare breathe a sigh of relief just yet, but the worst of the panic was beginning to lift. Lysandra's face had grown pale, her lips now tinged with blue. Despite the warmth being transferred to Marcus, she seemed to be struggling, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The blue light around her fingers flickered. You need to stop, Evelyn said, instinctively reaching out to pull Lysandra's hand away from Marcus's chest. You're weakening yourself. Lysandra shook her head, barely able to lift her eyes to meet Evelyn's. I am bound to this exchange, she whispered, barely able to speak through the strain. Without the heat of another, I will die. It is the only way I survive. Evelyn hesitated. She didn't know if she could trust this alien, but right now her crew's survival was at stake. Marcus was still alive, his breathing regular, and his skin was returning to its normal hue. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn nodded. Just be careful. Lysandra closed her eyes and nodded once, her face a mask of concentration. The light from her hand grew faint, and for a moment, Evelyn thought that it was all for nothing, that the woman might collapse in the middle of her healing process. But then, like the warming rays of the sun breaking through a storm, the energy in the air shifted. Lysandra's body seemed to absorb the warmth from Marcus, her energy coalescing into something more stable, more controlled. She opened her eyes, this time with a look of weariness, but also one of relief. Marcus stirred beneath her touch, his eyelids fluttering. He let out a groan, his body shuddering as though he was waking from a long, disorienting sleep. Where am I?" he whispered, his voice thick with confusion. "You're safe," Evelyn said quickly, her hands shaking as she helped him sit up. "We're not out of the woods yet, but you're going to make it?" Marcus blinked, then his gaze shifted to Lysandra, who was still kneeling beside him, breathing heavily. His brow furrowed as he tried to comprehend what had just happened. "Who?" he began, but Evelyn cut him off. "Not now, Marcus. We've got to get moving. The storm's not going to wait for us." Marcus, still dazed, looked at Lysandra again. His confusion was palpable, but he didn't have the strength to argue. His mind, clouded by the cold and the shock, couldn't quite piece together the situation. Evelyn didn't blame him, she was just as lost. But they had little time to question their savior. The storm outside was growing worse, and they had to make their way back to the shelter before they risked freezing to death. Evelyn stood up and helped Marcus to his feet. Lysandra looked up at them, her expression unreadable. "You can't stay here long," Lysandra said, her voice quiet but firm. "I need warmth, and you need to keep moving." Evelyn's heart raced. She didn't know if she could trust this woman, but her team had been given a second chance, thanks to Lysandra's mysterious powers. The stakes were too high. They had to move forward, even if that meant placing their faith in an alien they barely understood. "Stay close," Evelyn said, glancing back at the woman. "We'll take you to the structure, but you have to help us find a way off this frozen hellhole." Lysandra nodded, the glow in her eyes dimming as she stood, her body now slightly unsteady. And so, with the storm howling around them, the uneasy alliance between human and alien was forged in the cold, as they set their sights on the hidden alien structure beneath the surface of Zeros. The unknown awaited them, and Evelyn had no idea what they would find, or what price they would pay for their survival. The unknown healer ***. The storm intensified as Evelyn, Marcus, and Lysandra trudged through the howling winds. The air seemed to carry a biting chill with every gust, and the terrain was becoming increasingly treacherous. They could barely see more than a few meters ahead of them, the swirling snowflakes obscuring everything. Even with the advanced thermal suits and equipment, the cold seeped through like a constant, gnawing force. Lysandra, still weakened from her healing of Marcus, stumbled every few steps, her once steady movements now uncoordinated. Evelyn was growing more concerned, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She glanced back to find Marcus trailing behind, his face pale and drawn but stable for now. His sudden recovery was a small miracle in itself, but Evelyn knew that the respite might be temporary. "Lysandra, you're not doing well. We need to find shelter, now," Evelyn said, her voice tight with worry. "We can't keep going like this." The alien woman, her glowing blue eyes now dimmed, shook her head weakly. I need warmth," she rasped, her voice hoarse and barely audible over the wind. "Without it, I will die." Evelyn's pulse quickened. They were in the middle of nowhere, the alien structure still several kilometers away, and they couldn't afford to stop. They were all on borrowed time. "There has to be another way," Evelyn muttered, looking around. Her eyes scanned the desolate horizon, seeking any kind of shelter, anything that could shield them from the brutal cold. In the distance, she noticed something, a dark shape rising from the snow, almost indistinguishable from the landscape, but it was large enough to catch her attention. "Over there," she said, pointing. "That might be an old settlement or even part of the structure we're searching for. We need to move faster." Lysandra looked at the distant structure with an unreadable expression, then slowly nodded. "I can keep moving, but the cold, it is not far from me." Evelyn tightened her jaw. She knew they didn't have the luxury of time. "Marcus, can you keep up?" she asked, glancing back at him. Marcus gave a quick nod, though his face was pale and his breath came in shallow, labored bursts. "I'm fine. Just tired," he muttered, his words thick with exhaustion. "Good. Let's go." The three of them pressed forward, the wind fighting them every step of the way, but the shape in the distance steadily grew larger. As they drew nearer, Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. The shape was indeed part of the alien structure they had been sent to investigate, a massive, black obelisk-like monolith partially buried in the snow. The structure's smooth surface seemed to absorb the surrounding light, giving it an ominous, almost unnatural appearance. "This is it," Evelyn breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and relief. "The structure. We found it." Lysandra's eyes were fixed on the obelisk, and for a moment she seemed to be lost in thought. "It is not just a monument," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "It was once a beacon, a signal to my people. But that was long ago." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "A signal? For what?" Lysandra's expression clouded with something like grief. "For a time, my kind had mastery over life and death. But we were also masters of our own destruction. The cold that you now feel, it is the result of our mistakes." The revelation hung heavy in the air as Evelyn processed Lysandra's words. An alien race with the power to manipulate life? It was something out of a myth, a story so fantastical it could hardly be believed, yet here they were, facing the consequences of that power. "Let's get inside," Evelyn urged, feeling the cold creeping into her bones. "We'll talk more once we're safe." They reached the base of the structure, and as they neared, Evelyn noticed something remarkable. The surface of the obelisk was not completely smooth. There were faint indentations, almost like a door frame, embedded within its black stone. Lysandra stepped forward and placed her hand on the stone, and as she did, the cold seemed to abate slightly. Her fingers glowed faintly, responding to some unseen mechanism. "This was built to be a sanctuary," Lysandra murmured. "A place to heal and protect us, but it was abandoned when the cold overtook us." With a soft rumble, the door-like indentations began to shift, the black stone groaning and separating, revealing a darkened entrance. Cold air rushed in from the opening, but it was nothing compared to the biting winds outside. As the door fully opened, the temperature inside was noticeably warmer. Still, it wasn't enough to stave off the gnawing cold that clung to their bodies. Evelyn ushered Marcus and Lysandra inside, then sealed the entrance behind them. The interior was vast, the walls curved and smooth, and glowing lines of unknown origin snaked across the surfaces. There was a sense of ancient power in the air, as if this place had once been alive with energy. Now, however, it was silent, cold, and untouched. Evelyn shivered as she took off her helmet and pulled off her gloves. Her fingers tingled with the lingering cold. "We're inside. But we can't just sit here." Lysandra, still weak, collapsed against a wall, her skin now pale, her once glowing eyes dim and unfocused. She had drained herself healing Marcus, and now she was near collapse herself. Evelyn's concern grew as she knelt beside her. "Lysandra, stay with us. We need answers," Evelyn said urgently. Lysandra's gaze was unfocused, her breath shallow. I cannot stay long. The cold inside me grows harder to manage. If I do not find warmth soon." Evelyn was about to insist that they find a solution when Marcus staggered over, his own face still pale but his body showing signs of recovery. His eyes met Lysandra's and something flickered there, a mixture of empathy and something else, something he wasn't ready to fully acknowledge. "We need to find the technology," Marcus said hoarsely. "We need it now or we're all going to die here." Evelyn looked between him and Lysandra, weighing her options. She couldn't afford to waste time, but she also couldn't ignore Lysandra's condition. "We'll find it," she said decisively. "But we need to keep you warm, Lysandra. If your species was able to control life energy, there has to be something here, something that can help you." Lysandra's eyes flickered with faint hope. "There is a chamber. Deep within. It might be the key." Evelyn nodded. "Lead the way." With Marcus's help, they guided Lysandra through the dark halls of the ancient structure. The walls hummed faintly, their glow pulsing with a life of their own. The deeper they went, the more Evelyn felt the weight of the unknown pressing in on them. This was more than a simple structure. It was a relic of something far greater, something that could either save them, or destroy them. As they descended into the depths of the ancient sanctuary, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it together. But even as they moved forward, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not the only ones drawn to this place. The past was reaching out to them. And it was about to make itself known. Bonds in the cold asterisk. The deeper they ventured into the structure, the more the air seemed to hum with an eerie resonance. The walls, once smooth and cold, now carried strange etchings and symbols that pulsed with faint, otherworldly light. The glow from the lines traced along the curves of the walls seemed to shift and twist as they moved, almost as though it were alive, reacting to their presence. Evelyn kept her gaze fixed on the path ahead, her breath coming in quick bursts. Despite being inside the monolithic structure, the temperature was still low enough to make her skin prickle, and every step they took into the depths felt heavier. She glanced back at Lysandra, who had grown progressively weaker, her steps slower, her face ashen. The alien's struggle was becoming more pronounced, and Evelyn's concern for her safety grew with every passing minute. "Hang on, Lysandra," Evelyn muttered, pushing herself to keep pace with Marcus as they continued down the winding corridors. "We're almost there. Just a little longer." Lysandra, her blue eyes now dim and unfocused, didn't reply. She was leaning heavily on Marcus, and though he was still recovering from his near-fatal exposure to the cold, he bore the weight of the alien's fragile body with surprising strength. Marcus's own face was pale, his breath shallow, but he moved steadily, a grim determination in his eyes. The journey was taxing on all of them. They had already trekked for hours through the deadly blizzards of zeros, and now they were facing an alien structure that was as mysterious as it was ancient. Every sound they made seemed to echo off the walls in the oppressive silence, and the deeper they descended, the more the temperature seemed to drop. They could feel the cold seeping through the cracks in the structure, a reminder that the planet outside was still ready to reclaim them if they faltered. "This place, it's alive," Marcus muttered, his voice heavy with awe and fear. "Can you feel it?" Evelyn nodded, glancing around at the shifting symbols that lined the walls. They didn't make sense, not in any way that human science could understand. The markings seemed to be ancient, but there was something about them that felt personal, almost as though they were meant for someone, or something, who could decipher them. The symbols seemed to pulse in time with Lysandra's faint breath, as if the structure itself was responding to her presence. "It's like it's recognizing her," Evelyn said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. She had heard about alien technologies that resonated with specific life forms, but to witness it firsthand was something else entirely. They reached the end of the corridor, which opened into a massive chamber. It was circular, with towering spires stretching up to a distant ceiling that was lost in shadow. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings and panels, some depicting strange, luminous creatures that seemed to shift and move within the rock itself. But it wasn't the artwork that caught Evelyn's attention, it was the centerpiece of the room. In the center of the chamber, suspended within a field of shimmering energy, was a pedestal. Resting upon it was a small, crystalline object, pulsating with an inner light that seemed to resonate with the very core of the structure. The object looked almost alive, as if it were a beating heart within the heart of the alien temple. The warmth radiating from it was palpable, even from a distance. Evelyn felt a strange pull toward the object. There was something deeply familiar about it, though she couldn't place why. Her instincts, honed over years of exploring the unknown, told her that this was the source of the technology they had been searching for. This was what had brought them to Zeros, and now it was within their reach. Lysandra's breath hitched and she stumbled forward, her eyes locking on the object. The heart of the Illyrians," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Evelyn stepped forward, her pulse quickening. "The heart? What is it? What does it do?" Lysandra's eyes seemed to clear slightly as she focused on the object. She stretched out a trembling hand toward it, but then paused, her gaze flickering between Evelyn and the pedestal. "It is the key. The power of life itself. The Illyrians once used it to heal, to control the energy of their world. But it is not without consequence. Those who take from it must give something in return." Marcus looked at Lysandra, his brow furrowing. "Give something in return? What does that mean?" Lysandra's lips parted as if to speak, but she faltered, her body suddenly racked with a violent shiver. Her knees buckled and she collapsed to the ground in a heap. Marcus rushed to catch her, but her frailty was too much and she slumped against him, her eyes fluttering closed. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. "Lysandra." She knelt beside the alien woman, feeling a sense of urgency rise within her. The pull of the heart had grown stronger, but it was clear that Lysandra wasn't going to make it without immediate help. Her body was growing colder with every passing second. "We need to act now," Evelyn said, more to herself than to anyone else. She stood quickly, her decision made. There was no choice. Lysandra needed warmth, and the heart was their only hope. Evelyn turned to Marcus, her eyes meeting his. He nodded silently, his expression hard but resolute. He knew what they had to do. "Stay with her," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "I'll try to get it working." With a final glance at Lysandra, who lay motionless in Marcus's arms, Evelyn stepped forward toward the pedestal. She felt the hum of energy in the air, the raw, untamed power that flowed through the heart. The light from the crystal pulsed faster as she approached, and a strange warmth spread through her fingertips when she reached out to touch it. As soon as her fingers made contact, the light intensified, and the energy field surrounding the pedestal flared. Evelyn gasped as the warmth surged through her, and for a brief moment she felt as though she could reach out and control the flow of energy. It was an exhilarating sensation, like being one with the very essence of the universe. But then something shifted. The heart's glow began to darken, the warmth suddenly turning cold and suffocating. The air thickened and the ground beneath Evelyn's feet trembled. She pulled her hand away, but the force of the energy surrounding the heart seemed to grip her, pulling her closer as if the object itself was resisting her touch. "No?" Evelyn gritted her teeth, trying to break free. But it was no use. The pull was too strong, and the light of the heart was now swirling around her like a storm. She could feel her strength draining away, as if the very life force was being siphoned from her. "Evelyn!" Marcus shouted from behind her. But it wasn't just Marcus's voice she heard. Somewhere within the swirling light, a voice echoed, a voice that was ancient, powerful, and unmistakably familiar. Give and take, one must always balance. The words reverberated through her mind like a warning. Evelyn's vision blurred as the energy field around the heart grew colder and more intense. She realized then that she wasn't just in control of the heart's power, she was being tested. The balance of life and death, the heart of the Illyrians, demanded sacrifice. And Evelyn had no idea what that sacrifice would be. The price of power ***. The pull of the heart was relentless, its energy surging through Evelyn as if it were alive, and it wasn't letting go. Her muscles burned, her body trembling under the strain, as if something deep within her was being drained. The cold that had been nipping at her skin intensified, swirling through the very fabric of her being, as though it sought to claim her from the inside out. Evelyn. Marcus's voice was strained, frantic. His footsteps echoed across the chamber, but they seemed distant, muffled by the rising intensity of the heart's power. Evelyn gritted her teeth, fighting the overwhelming force pulling her closer. Her fingers were locked on the pedestal, her skin tingling from the intense heat that had once surrounded the crystal, now turned icy cold and suffocating. The chamber around her flickered in her vision. Flashes of lights, symbols, and ancient carvings danced, shifting as though alive, responding to the heart's rhythm. The words she had heard echoed louder in her mind. Give and take, one must always balance. Balance, the words swirled in her thoughts. She understood now. The heart wasn't just a source of power, it was a force of equilibrium, a guardian of the ancient order that the Illyrians had once lived by. And now it was demanding a sacrifice. Evelyn's heart raced as the realization hit her. She wasn't the first to touch this power, Lysandra had known the cost. She must have understood the balance better than anyone. Her species, it seemed, had once harnessed the heart's power but at a price that had driven them to the edge of extinction. Evelyn. Marcus's voice cracked, urgent and filled with desperation. He was so close but still too far away. Please let go. But Evelyn couldn't. The heart was taking from her, draining her energy, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Every cell in her body screamed for release, yet she felt a strange connection to the heart, a deep understanding and unspoken bond. It was as if the heart knew her, recognized something within her. Her vision began to blur. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in, the light growing more intense, the symbols on the walls shifting and warping as though they were alive. For a fleeting moment, she thought she could hear the distant hum of voices, whispers of those who had come before, those who had fallen victim to the power of the heart. She tried to pull her hand away, but the force holding her was too strong, as if it had become part of her, intertwined with her own energy. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she felt herself growing weaker. Give. The voice whispered again, but this time it was clearer. It was a command, not a suggestion. Evelyn's body was no longer her own. She could feel her life force being siphoned away, slipping from her like sand through an hourglass. And then, as if the heart had granted her some final understanding, it all clicked into place. The price wasn't just something physical. It was a part of her soul. The heart demanded balance between creation and destruction, between life and death. The Illyrians had built it to harness the energy of life itself. It was a living entity that drew from those who were willing to pay the price, offering them healing and power in return for something far more precious. And Evelyn realized with a sickening clarity that she was the one who was being asked to pay. Her body trembled as she resisted the urge to give in, the desire to relinquish control overpowering her every instinct. She was at the precipice. She could feel it, a part of herself slipping away with every passing second. But there was something else, a flicker of light inside her, something she couldn't explain. A spark of defiance. The heart might demand a sacrifice, but Evelyn wasn't going to give up everything, not without a fight. She wouldn't let herself become another casualty of the heart's power, another piece lost in the great equation of life and death. She had something more to give, more to fight for. No, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I won't let it take me. In a final, desperate act, Evelyn pushed against the pulsing energy with every ounce of strength she had left. She drew on her own willpower, a fierce resolve burning inside her as she tried to break free of the heart's grip. She wasn't just a vessel for its power, she was its challenge. The energy around her flickered, and for a moment she felt the pressure release, just enough to catch her breath. The heart wavered as if testing her resolve. Evelyn! Marcus shouted, his voice breaking through the haze of her thoughts. His hand gripped her wrist, pulling at her, his desperation clear. But Evelyn's body was weakening, her energy rapidly draining. She was on the verge of collapse. Give. The voice echoed again, louder now, almost imperious. It was more than just a command, it was a force demanding her surrender. Evelyn's mind raced. What could she give? What was she willing to sacrifice? Her breath hitched as a thought struck her. If it demanded balance, then it must also recognize the power of a choice. She wasn't bound to this place, to this ancient force. She could choose even in the face of this impossible power. With a great heave of will, Evelyn yanked her hand away from the pedestal. She stumbled backward, the room spinning, the light of the heart flashing violently as if protesting her resistance. But she didn't fall. She refused to let it take her. She collapsed into Marcus's arms, her breath shallow and ragged. The chill of the chamber still gripped her, but it was nothing compared to the icy fingers that had tried to claim her life force. Marcus's arms wrapped around her, steady and warm. Evelyn, are you? I'm fine, she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't give it everything. I didn't. Lysandra's voice was faint, but she stirred beside them. She had been silent through most of the ordeal, too weak to intervene, but now her eyes flickered open, filled with both relief and concern. You did well, she murmured, her words weak but sincere. The heart, it tests everyone. But you're right. You must choose. Evelyn swallowed, her body aching as if she had run a marathon. It wanted everything, but I didn't let it take me. Lysandra's gaze softened, though her features were still strained. Not everyone can resist. Most would have given in. But you have strength. That's why you're still here. Evelyn turned her gaze to the heart, still pulsing with its own ancient power. It wasn't finished. She could feel it deep in her bones. The heart was waiting for the next challenge, the next person to test. It's not over, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on her. We need to figure out what's next. There's more to this place than just power. More to this ancient technology than just giving and taking. Marcus nodded grimly, his face still pale but determined. We'll figure it out. Together. Lysandra slowly pushed herself upright, her strength returning in small, halting steps. We need to understand the heart. It's the key to what happened to my people, to how we fell. Evelyn met her eyes, her resolve hardening. She had just seen the true cost of this power. And she wasn't going to let it take anything more from her, or anyone else, without learning everything she could. This was only the beginning. The price of knowledge ***. The chamber had grown still, the echoes of the heart's call fading into a tense silence. The pulsing energy that had gripped Evelyn and the others seemed to settle into the walls, humming faintly like a heartbeat. Even though the immediate danger had passed, the presence of the heart loomed over them, its demands unsatisfied, its power still palpable in the air. Evelyn's breath came in ragged bursts, her chest heaving from the strain. She felt as if she had just been through a battle, but it wasn't over. Far from it. She glanced at Marcus, who was still holding her, his face a mask of worry and determination. Lysandra, though weakened, was regaining some strength, her deep blue eyes flickering with renewed focus. Are you all right? Marcus asked, his voice low but insistent. Evelyn nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was entirely telling the truth. I'm fine, she replied, forcing a steady tone. Just a little drained. Lysandra managed to sit up fully now, her breathing shallow but controlled. She surveyed the group, her eyes flicking to the heart at the center of the room, then back to Evelyn and Marcus. She looked like she had something on her mind, but she wasn't sure how to say it. The heart demands a sacrifice, Lysandra said softly, almost to herself. But not in the way we understand it. It isn't just about giving something physical. It takes from your soul. Your very essence. The Illyrians, we knew that, but we believed we could control it. In the end, we couldn't. Evelyn swallowed. The cold, ancient feeling of the heart, the overwhelming presence it radiated, had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. You said it was the key. The key to what? Lysandra's eyes darkened, and she seemed to draw inward. To the fall of my people. The heart was meant to be the center of everything, the source of our power, our healing, our longevity. But it was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be shared. But over time, greed and ambition twisted its purpose. Evelyn frowned. What happened to your people? Lysandra looked down at the ground, a pang of sadness flashing in her eyes. The heart was our most precious artifact, a gift from the stars. But as we grew in power, we became more desperate to unlock its full potential. Instead of sharing its gifts, we hoarded them. We thought we could use it to conquer, to heal every wound, to create eternal life. But it doesn't work that way. The heart demands balance. If you take too much, it will take just as much in return. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she grasped at the cold stone beneath her. In the end, our civilization collapsed. We had drained the heart dry, and when it retaliated, it was too late. It left us with nothing but the cold. Nothing but the ruins of what we once were. Evelyn's mind raced as the implications of Lysandra's words sank in. If the heart had destroyed an entire civilization, how could they hope to control it? How could they even use it to save Lysandra, to reverse the damage that had been done? The consequences were too great. And yet, there was a part of her that knew that the heart was far more than just a relic of a fallen people. It was the key to something much bigger. Something she didn't fully understand. We can't let it take anything more from us, Evelyn said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. We need to find a way to stop it from draining us all. We need to understand what it really wants. Lysandra's expression grew more serious and she nodded. I've been trying to decipher the symbols in this place for years. But the heart? It's unlike anything I've ever encountered. The Illyrians could never truly master it. But there are clues here. Hidden truths. If we can find them, we may have a chance to turn things around. Marcus stepped forward, his brow furrowed with concern. How do we even begin? The heart is unlike anything we've ever dealt with. We can't just touch it and expect it to stop draining us. It seems to have a mind of its own. Lysandra met his gaze. It does. But it's not invincible. The heart needs balance. Without it, it loses its purpose. And that's where we can strike. If we can find a way to restore the balance between life and death, creation and destruction, we may be able to control it. Or, at the very least, survive it. Evelyn looked at the pedestal once more. The heart was still pulsing, but now it seemed calmer, as if it were waiting. She could almost feel its attention on them. The weight of its power was suffocating, but there was a flicker of hope buried in the alien's words. Balance, Evelyn repeated. But how do we restore balance? What's the key to controlling it? Lysandra's eyes flickered with uncertainty. That's the part one don't know. But there's something hidden in the structure. Something the Illyrians left behind. A clue, perhaps. We have to find it. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She stood and brushed off the dust from her clothing. Then we start looking. We have no other choice. The group moved forward cautiously this time as they explored the chamber. The walls, once cold and indifferent, now felt alive with the energy of the heart. Each step seemed to reverberate through the ancient stone, and the symbols on the walls shifted with them, reacting to their presence. Evelyn could feel the subtle pull of the heart, like a weight pressing on her chest, but this time it wasn't trying to claim her, it was waiting, watching. They made their way to the far side of the chamber, where the walls were lined with deeper carvings. The symbols here were different, more intricate, more detailed, and the air around them seemed to hum with a strange energy. The carvings seemed to tell a story, but the language was foreign, its meanings obscure. Lysandra approached the wall with reverence, running her fingers over the carvings, her expression focused. She muttered to herself in the Illyrian language, her voice soft but filled with emotion. This is it. This is where it all began. Evelyn and Marcus stood back, giving her space as she worked. It was clear that Lysandra understood these symbols better than they did. Her people had created them after all. And while Evelyn had no idea what they meant, she trusted Lysandra's knowledge. After a long moment, Lysandra straightened up, her expression grim. I think I understand. These symbols, they tell the story of the Illyrian collapse. Of how the heart was used to manipulate life itself. But there's something else here. A warning? She turned to face them. It says that the heart was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be shared. Only by offering something in return can you prevent it from taking everything. Evelyn felt a chill creep down her spine. What does it want us to offer? Lysandra's gaze hardened. It doesn't specify. But the heart can only be balanced by giving something equally precious in return. The weight of her words hung in the air like a dark cloud. They were not just facing an ancient alien artifact. They were facing a force that demanded the ultimate sacrifice. I can't let it take any more from us, Evelyn whispered, her voice shaking. There has to be another way. Lysandra looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and sorrow. We may not have a choice. And as they stood there, the pulse of the heart growing stronger with every passing second, Evelyn knew that the true cost of their mission was only just beginning to reveal itself. The choice they faced was not one of survival alone, it was a choice of sacrifice, of giving something irreplaceable to restore balance. And they would have to make that choice soon. The choice of sacrifice ***. The air in the chamber was thick with tension, the pulsating glow of the heart casting eerie shadows across the walls. The overwhelming presence of the heart, a force that demanded balance and sacrifice, felt heavier now. Evelyn, Marcus, and Lysandra stood together, their minds racing to comprehend the implications of what they had just discovered. The ancient warnings in the carvings had set the stage for what was to come. The heart was not merely a source of power, but a living entity with an insatiable hunger for balance. Lysandra turned away from the wall, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped the sweat from her brow. "The heart demands an exchange," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It takes what it is given, but if it is not balanced with an equal sacrifice, it will consume everything. That's how my people fell." Evelyn swallowed hard. "So, if we don't give something of equal value, it will destroy us?" Lysandra nodded gravely. "Not just us. It would consume the entire planet, the whole of what remains of the Illyrian Empire. The heart isn't just an artifact, it's a mechanism of universal equilibrium. It seeks to balance creation and destruction, life and death. If one side of the equation is tipped too far, it will correct itself." The weight of the situation pressed down on Evelyn's chest, but there was something in Lysandra's eyes, a flicker of resolve, that sparked hope. Lysandra had lived through the fall of her people. She had witnessed firsthand the destructive power of the heart, and yet, there was still a fire in her to fight back. Marcus stepped forward, his face drawn with concern but filled with determination. "What kind of sacrifice are we talking about? What will we have to give to restore the balance?" Lysandra looked at him, her gaze hardening. "I don't know for sure. The heart doesn't make its demands clear until it's too late. But I believe that it wants something from each of us. A piece of our very essence. A part of our souls, our life force, our vitality. That's the cost of controlling it." Evelyn's heart sank at the thought. The heart's thirst for balance wasn't satisfied by mere material wealth or blood. It wanted something much deeper, something more intimate. And the more she thought about it, the more she understood that Lysandra's people had made the same mistake they were at risk of making now. They had tried to control the heart without understanding its true nature. "We have to find another way," Evelyn murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The idea of sacrificing a part of herself to the heart sent a chill down her spine. She had come this far to stop the cycle of destruction, but the thought of losing herself in the process, of paying that price, was unbearable. Maybe it's not about controlling it at all," Marcus suggested, his voice steady. "What if we could find a way to release its power? Instead of trying to hold on to it, what if we could set it free, let it do what it was meant to do without letting it consume us?" Lysandra's eyes flickered with something, an idea, a possibility, but then she shook her head slowly. "I thought the same thing. I tried. But the heart is a force of nature. It doesn't operate on our terms. It doesn't care about what we want. All it understands is balance, and if it feels threatened or manipulated, it will correct that imbalance with destruction." Evelyn felt the weight of the situation pressing on her chest, the weight of the heart's power echoing in every corner of the room. She felt like she was trapped in a game she didn't understand, with no way out. But then, as she thought about what Lysandra had said, about balance, about the price that must be paid, something clicked in her mind. "I think we've been looking at this all wrong," Evelyn said, her voice rising with a new clarity. "We're thinking about it as if it's a choice between survival and sacrifice. But what if it's not a choice? What if the heart isn't asking for something we need to give up, but something we need to accept?" Lysandra frowned, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Accept what?" Evelyn's mind raced. She thought about the way the heart had felt when she first touched it, the way it pulsed, alive and insistent. The way it demanded everything, yet it had never truly taken from her. It hadn't drained her the way she thought it would. Instead, it had made her feel connected to something larger than herself, something ancient and powerful. What if the heart is trying to show us something? Evelyn said, more to herself now as the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place. What if it's trying to show us that we don't need to fight it, but we need to understand it? Accept the balance of life and death, creation and destruction. Accept the fact that we can't control everything. We need to let go of that need for control. Marcus stared at her, his eyes wide with understanding. "You think we need to surrender ourselves to the heart?" Evelyn hesitated, feeling the weight of her own words. It sounded insane even to her. But the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. The heart wasn't just a tool of power, it was a force of nature, an agent of balance. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't meant to be controlled. Perhaps the only way to harness its power was to become part of it, to accept the balance it offered. "I don't know if surrendering ourselves is the answer," Evelyn said finally. But I think we need to stop fighting it. We need to find a way to work with it, not against it. Lyssandra's gaze softened and she stepped forward. You're right. The Illyrians, we tried to bend the heart to our will, and in doing so we destroyed ourselves. We lost sight of the balance it required. But how do we work with it? Marcus asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. How do we make peace with something like that? Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of them. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. The heart was more than just a source of power, it was a reflection of the universe's natural order. It demanded balance, not through control or destruction, but through acceptance of the cycles of life and death. I think we have to be willing to accept the heart's demand, Evelyn said quietly. Not as a sacrifice but as a shared understanding. We give the heart a piece of ourselves, not in the sense of giving something up, but by accepting the flow of energy between us and it. We let go of our fear of losing ourselves and let the heart teach us how to truly live in balance. The room fell silent as the gravity of Evelyn's words settled on the group. The heart, still pulsing with its eerie light, seemed to watch them, waiting for their next move. Lysandra stepped forward, her expression resolute. We must be ready to face the consequences. The heart may test us again, but this time we'll face it together. Not as enemies but as partners. Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. If they were going to survive, they would need to embrace the heart's power on its own terms. It would not be an easy path, but it was the only one that held any hope. Let's do this, Evelyn said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. Together. And with that they stepped forward, ready to face the heart and whatever price it would demand. Together they would fight for balance, whatever that might mean. The heart's reckoning ****. The chamber was deathly silent. The heart pulsed, its soft hum reverberating through the ancient stone walls, and with each beat, Evelyn could feel it, like a pull in her chest, urging her forward. It was both comforting and terrifying at once, an overwhelming force, yet one that seemed to beckon her closer with promises of answers, power, and a resolution to the endless cycles of destruction. The time had come. There would be no more delays. No more second-guessing. They had decided to face it, to accept whatever it demanded, and now they had to live with the consequences. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was clearer than it had ever been. She stepped forward first, her feet moving with purpose as if guided by some invisible force. She could feel the others behind her, their presence solid and unwavering. Lysandra's eyes were sharp, Marcus's breath steady, but there was a shared understanding between them now. They were not here to conquer the heart. They were here to become one with it. The chamber felt warmer now, the cold air receding as they approached the pulsing mass of light that was the heart. Its radiance seemed to pull at the fabric of the room, folding the darkness into itself. Evelyn could feel the raw energy of it as she drew closer, powerful, primal, yet strangely inviting. Lysandra was the first to speak, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Remember, we must surrender ourselves to it, not as victims but as equals. The heart will not tolerate fear. It must feel our trust. Marcus looked at her and then at Evelyn, his gaze intense. We trust you, Evelyn. We're with you. Evelyn nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She didn't know how this would end, didn't know if they would emerge from this as the same people, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't alone. Not anymore. They reached the center of the room, where the heart hovered, its glowing surface shifting in a slow, almost deliberate motion. It seemed to respond to their presence, growing brighter as they stood before it. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, synchronized with the rhythm of the heart, as if they were already linked by some invisible thread. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out. She could feel the heat radiating from the heart, though it wasn't oppressive. It was like a living thing, alive in a way that no human or creature should ever be, yet somehow familiar, as though it had always been part of her. She hesitated for only a moment before placing her palm against the pulsating surface. Instantly the world seemed to tilt. The air shimmered, and the very fabric of reality felt like it was stretching, distorting. Evelyn gasped, feeling as though she were falling through time itself. The heart's energy surged through her, not in a violent rush, but as a gentle wave, smooth and constant, yet undeniably powerful. She closed her eyes, letting the energy flood her senses, letting it fill the spaces in her mind that had been empty for so long. In that moment she could feel every thought, every emotion, every action she had ever taken. It was as if she were no longer an individual, but part of something far greater. She saw flashes of memories, Her childhood, the first time she touched the heart, the battles she had fought, the pain of loss, the moments of victory. But those memories were not just her own. They were the memories of the heart itself, echoes of every being that had ever touched it, every soul that had been connected to it. The lives of the Illyrians, the deaths, the fall of their civilization, and the years of struggle that had followed. They all passed through her like a river of consciousness flowing in and out of her mind. Suddenly, Evelyn felt herself pulled deeper, into the heart itself. She gasped, her breath caught in her throat as she felt her body grow weightless, her soul unraveling as it was drawn into the core of the heart's power. Her skin tingled as if every atom of her body were being aligned with the very fabric of the universe. Evelyn, Marcus's voice broke through the overwhelming sensations, pulling her back to reality. His voice was full of concern, but there was something else in it, a deep understanding as if he too had touched the heart in some way. She opened her eyes, seeing him standing before her, his face a mixture of awe and fear. I can feel it, Evelyn whispered. It's everything, every living thing, every soul, every balance that has ever existed. The heart's pulse slowed for a moment, almost as if it were listening. The temperature in the room began to shift again, the overwhelming heat now tempered by a cool, calming presence. The pressure around Evelyn's chest eased, and she realized that the heart was not trying to crush her. It was trying to communicate with her, to understand her, just as she was beginning to understand it. Do you feel it? She asked Marcus, her voice distant as if she were speaking from a great distance. It's not just a force, it's alive. It's asking us to accept it, to accept the balance it offers. But it's not asking for a sacrifice. It's asking us to be the sacrifice. Marcus stepped closer, his brow furrowed in thought. What do you mean? We're supposed to give it part of our essence, right? Evelyn nodded slowly, her hand still pressed against the heart. It's not about giving it something. It's about becoming part of it. The heart doesn't want something from us. It wants us to understand it. We have to let go of everything we've ever believed about control, about fear of losing ourselves. Lysandra, who had been watching in silence, spoke up. The Illyrians tried to conquer it. We thought we could control it, bend it to our will. But we never understood it. It doesn't seek to dominate. It seeks balance. It seeks to become one with all things. Evelyn's voice was steady now, filled with certainty. The heart wants us to accept its power not as a curse but as a gift. A gift that can only be given when we release our fear and trust it to do what it was meant to do. For a long moment, the room was silent. The heart pulsed, brighter now, its energy wrapping around them like a cloak. The pressure in the air grew thick again, but this time it wasn't oppressive. It was all-encompassing, like a warm embrace that welcomed them into its fold. Then, suddenly, the heart seemed to speak, not in words but in emotions and sensations. Evelyn felt a surge of warmth, of understanding, flood through her. She felt it in her bones, in the marrow of her soul. The heart was not just a source of power. It was a mirror of the universe's balance, a reflection of life and death, creation and destruction. And it was offering them a chance to be part of that balance, to step into a greater truth than they had ever known. The ground beneath them rumbled, and the air grew thick with energy, crackling like a storm. Evelyn's chest tightened as the heart's power surged. But this time it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. We are ready, she whispered. The heart's light flared, blinding in its intensity. And then, with a suddenness that stole her breath away, Evelyn felt herself merge with it. Time stopped. For a moment there was only light, endless, blinding light. She was no longer herself, no longer human. She was part of the heart, part of the balance it created. She could feel every life force, every heartbeat, every pulse of energy in the universe. She was connected to everything, the stars, the planets, the cycles of birth and death. She was at once everything and nothing. And then just as quickly the light dimmed and Evelyn was back in her own body. She gasped, her breath returning to her in ragged bursts, her heart pounding as the room reformed around her. The heart's power settled into her chest, a quiet hum that resonated through her, like a new heartbeat in the depths of her soul. Marcus, Lysandra, and the others looked at her with a mixture of awe and fear as if they too had been touched by the heart in some way. The heart had been accepted. It was no longer a force to be fought, but one to be understood and embraced. And as Evelyn stood there, her heart still racing, she knew the universe had just been irrevocably changed. They had passed the reckoning. And the balance had been restored. The dawn of balance ***. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heart, its glow now a steady, comforting rhythm that pulsed like the beat of a living heart. Evelyn could feel it deep within her, the power and presence of the heart now a part of her being, a connection forged not through force, but through understanding. The weight of what had just transpired settled over her. She had surrendered to it as had Marcus and Lysandra. Their journey together had brought them to this critical point, and they had emerged as something different, something more. As Evelyn took a deep breath, she felt the lingering sensations from the heart's energy ripple through her, like an aftershock of power. It wasn't overwhelming anymore. It was grounding, peaceful, almost like it was soothing her mind, her body, and her soul. But despite the calm, questions remained. What would happen next? What would the heart demand from them, or had it already taken all that it needed? Is it over? Marcus's voice broke the stillness, his words filled with a quiet awe and a touch of hesitation. Evelyn looked at him, his face illuminated by the faint light of the heart. The lines of tension that had once drawn tight around his features were now softened. It was as though the heart had worked its magic on him as well, calming the fears that had gripped him during their struggle. But there was still uncertainty in his eyes. "I don't know," Evelyn said softly, her voice trembling slightly as the weight of their decision began to sink in. "But I think we've done what we were meant to do." Lysandra stepped forward, her face unreadable, her eyes locked on the heart. "The Illyrians sought to control it, but they never understood it," she said, her voice distant. "We tried to subdue it, to make it ours. But we never embraced it, never accepted its true nature. We thought we could impose our will on it. But it was never about control. It was about balance. About surrendering to the flow of the universe." She turned to Evelyn, her gaze softening with understanding. "You were right, Evelyn. The heart isn't something to be feared or conquered. It is a part of something much larger than any of us. It's a force that binds everything: life, death, creation, destruction. We were always meant to be part of it, to understand it, not to fight it." Evelyn nodded, her mind still swirling with the enormity of what had just happened. She felt the truth of Lysandra's words deep in her bones. The heart hadn't been a weapon to wield. It hadn't been something that could be controlled. It had been a living, breathing entity that sought harmony, a balance that was eternal and unchanging. For a moment, the chamber was completely still. The heart's pulse continued, steady and unbroken, like the beat of the earth itself. The air was thick with the kind of energy that one could almost touch, a palpable force, powerful yet gentle. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment wash over her. This was the dawn of a new age, one that was forged through sacrifice, understanding, and acceptance. She opened her eyes and looked at the others. Their faces were illuminated by the heart's light, but their expressions were not of fear or confusion anymore. There was clarity in their eyes, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. They had embraced the heart and in doing so had become part of its rhythm. They were no longer separate from it, they were united with it. Evelyn could sense the change in them just as she felt it in herself. "We've accepted the balance," Evelyn said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "And now we must live with it. The heart has no more power over us than we allow it. But we have to live in harmony with it as part of it. It will no longer consume us if we understand that." Marcus stepped closer, his face serious but filled with resolve. "Then we move forward. Together." Lysandra nodded, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. "Yes, together. We were never meant to face the heart alone." The glow of the heart brightened, then softened again. It was as if it were acknowledging their words, recognizing the shift in their understanding. The energy in the room was different now, not oppressive, not threatening, but calm. The heart had revealed its true nature, and they had accepted it. It was a living part of the universe's cycle, not a force to be controlled, but a force to be honored and respected. Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her as she looked around at her companions. They had all sacrificed something: fear, pride, and their own misconceptions. But in return they had gained something far greater: unity, understanding, and a glimpse of the vast, intricate web that connected all things. The heart had shown them the true meaning of balance, not the elimination of chaos, but its acceptance and integration into the greater flow of existence. "We have our work cut out for us," Evelyn said, her voice steady now, filled with conviction. "The heart won't fix everything on its own. It's not a solution, it's a tool. It gives us the ability to see the world for what it truly is, to see the interconnections between all things. But it's up to us to use that wisdom, to learn from it and act accordingly." Lysandra took a step back, her eyes flickering toward the distant ruins of the Illyrian city. "My people, they never understood that. They thought power could be seized, that strength could be imposed. But the heart shows us that true power lies in understanding, in balance. If we can teach others to see that, to live in harmony with the heart, Perhaps the Illyrian legacy doesn't have to be one of destruction. Maybe we can rebuild, but not through domination. Through cooperation. Evelyn's heart swelled with hope. This was the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild, to reshape the future not through the conquest of others, but through a shared understanding of the natural forces that shape the universe. They had seen the destructive path of unchecked power. Now they had the opportunity to follow a different way. It would not be easy. There would be struggles, obstacles, and resistance. But they would face it together, united by the knowledge that the heart, in its infinite complexity, had shown them the way. We have to start somewhere, Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Let's begin with the ones who need us most. The survivors. They will need guidance. And we can be the ones to show them what balance looks like. Evelyn nodded, her mind already racing with plans. They had the wisdom now. They had the key to understanding the heart. And though the road ahead would be difficult, she knew one thing for certain. It was a road worth walking. The heart's glow began to dim, the pulsing light gradually fading to a gentle shimmer. It was no longer a threat or a source of dread. It was part of them. And it would always be a part of the universe, a reminder that balance could be achieved not through the subjugation of others, but through the acceptance of all things: life, death, creation, destruction, chaos, and order. Evelyn felt the weight of her decision, the enormity of the task ahead, but it was not a burden. It was a responsibility, yes. But it was one she would carry proudly, alongside her companions. They had faced the heart, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to lead the way. And as the final pulse of the heart echoed through the chamber, a new dawn broke over the horizon, a dawn of balance, understanding, and unity. Together they had found their place in the universe, and now they would walk forward, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. For the heart had shown them the path, and it was a path they would walk together forever. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.